Hello, everyone. Traditional family values have been a fundamental principle underpinning Heritage Party policy since we began in 2020. But it's been very interesting over the last few weeks that many of the other political parties, some of which are even in the Uniparty, which I despise because of what they've done to the country over the last 40 years. But they have started to talk about family and the importance of family, and they're seemingly trying to outdo each other about how much they support families. They don't actually, really, because you can tell from what they've done and all the things they've done to undermine families, such as promoting LGBT alphabet nonsense, teaching kids that they're not boys and girls, that they're the other gender, and making divorce easier, and doing everything they possibly can to undermine men. Nothing wrong with empowering women, but that's done at the expense of disempowering men and actually being quite derisive to men in general. And of course, traditional family is a mother and a father and children. They all have a part to play, and they all need to be affirmed and empowered and encouraged to carry out their roles in the traditional family. Now, with the Heritage Party, of course, we've had a section on traditional family values since we began in 2020, since our launch, and our manifesto was there, and that was one of the central and fundamental sections of our social conservatism, because we are a socially conservative party. Indeed, the Heritage Party is the only truly socially conservative party that is UK-wide. And what I mean by that is we are active and we stand candidates in England and Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland as well. There is no other party like us that does all of those things in all of those areas. But what I'm doing at the moment, as I do every year, is I'm updating the manifesto and putting into it new things to take into account changes in society and in politics, and also just ideas that people are given to me, whether they're from members or from people who have written about different things. And often people do that. They write to me and I think, well, that's a good idea. We need to put that in the manifesto. So I've been updating many of the sections. Have already completed the update on education, on democracy, and so on. That's already live and up on our website. And I've just this morning updated the section on traditional family values. And I'm just going to put that in the screen here and show you what that says now. Well, the first bit here is with this, that's already been there. Everything on this first page has been there since 2020, the traditional family values. And then the first paragraph, the Heritage Party will seek to maintain and strengthen the institutions of marriage and the natural family. The party holds that the true and right definition of marriage is that of a covenant and union between one man and one woman. So, of course, I said that many times, marriage is a man and a woman, and with children being brought up by their own married mother and father, have the best outcomes in all measures that you can think of. You know, obviously there's a bell curve of success. It doesn't apply to every single individual, but in general, children in that situation have better educational outcomes, better financial outcomes, better employment outcomes, less depression, less self-harm, less suicide, happier, well-adjusted families when they grow up, and all these things. So that's completely and absolutely conclusive from every study that you can ever look at, except the ones that have been written by the LGBT community as propaganda, which obviously you discount because they are blatantly biased and they don't come to the same conclusions as all the other studies which are not biased. So let's go on to the second page here. And again, the first two paragraphs there have been there since 2020, talking about that, better outcomes for children. I've just put in here the third paragraph, which explains what we would do in legislation. So we'll repeal the legislation that has redefined marriage. So all of those things that have changed the definition of marriage to say that you can be married if you're a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. Well, you can't. That's not the right definition of marriage. So we'd repeal all of those things in England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, there's new sections here on divorce, and I think this happened since we were founded. The Tories, supposedly conservative, made no-fault divorce a matter of law, which it never was before, which means that anyone can just dissolve a marriage just like that. They don't have to give a reason, and which basically makes marriage, not worth the paper it's written on. I mean, what's the point of getting married if your partner that you marry can just dissolve the marriage just like that for no good reason at all? That goes completely against what marriage is: a covenant for life and a union between a man and a woman that will then reproduce and have children. That goes against all conservative principles. You would think this was written by a radical cultural Marxist, but it was introduced by the so-called Conservative Party, the fake Conservative Party. So this is what the Heritage Party would do. We would repeal the Divorce, Dissolution and Separation Act 2020 that allows no-fault divorce, undermining marriage as a lifelong union and covenant between a man and a woman that is essential for providing the stability to bring up children. So again, this is just more evidence that conservatives are not conservative, don't have anything to do with them if you want to restore socially conservative principles in our nation. Again, here, and moving on, a couple of other extra things which I think were not obvious, but they were included before, almost without saying, but I've just made it obvious here. Adoption. So we will repeal the Adoption and Children Act 2020 to restrict the adoption of children to married male-female couples only. And this was a terrible act, because what happened soon after that is there were all these wonderful adoption agencies that were run by Roman Catholics and others, and they placed children who needed adoption, who needed a mother and father, with married couples. And they were told, you either have to start placing children with gay homosexual couples, or you have to close down. Well, of course, the Roman Catholics, who run these agencies, did very well. Of course, we're not going to do that. That goes against our principles. So they all had to close down. And because of that, many children have not been able to be placed quickly or easily like they were before. There was no need for this. It's a spiteful act. And we would repeal it and allow Roman Catholic and other Christian, mainly adoption agencies, to open again. And obviously, with adoption only being for married male-female couples only, they would be able to operate according to their Christian principles. Surrogacy. So we will legislate to ban surrogacy, where babies are manufactured to order, often to be placed in unnatural families without a mother and a father. So this is something that's you see being promoted by homosexual celebrities. They've got a baby. However, they're not the father and the mother. Maybe one of them is the father, but they've paid a mother to carry a baby. As soon as it's born, it's taken away from its mother and it's placed with two men or two women, completely unnaturally. So we would legislate to stop that from happening, because that's not good for the child, obviously. So this is the final page here. The bit at the bottom, asserting the traditional family and two biological sexes in schools, has been there since 2020. So, of course, what this is saying is there are two sexes, male and female, which are determined by anatomy and chromosomes. That's what children should be taught, and they shouldn't be taught anything that undermines the scientific fact that there are two sexes, male and female, and you cannot change your sex by having your body operated on, mutilated, and there are the whole gender ideology there, and we don't want anything that undermines traditional family values. What I said before, all studies show that children do better with a married mother and a father. That's not to disparage people who find themselves in situations which they don't want to be in, but the traditional family structure needs to be upheld and affirmed to children in schools. So there's nothing different there, and we would introduce Hungarian-style legislation to prohibit the promotion of LGBT alphabet people ideologies to minors under 18. So that's all been there since 2020. We got a couple of new sections at the top here on page 3 of this document on traditional family values, our new updated manifesto. Actually, the supporting fathers part has been there since the beginning, but supporting mothers, I've just put that in because we need to talk about supporting mothers and supporting fathers. And what is a dreadful paradigm and expectation that is put on women these days by politicians, the media, businesses, is that as soon as they've had a baby, they should go out to work as quickly as possible. Every politician in the Uniparty, whether it's Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, Green, they all talk about getting mothers back to work after they've had a child. Well, I don't agree with that. Mothers should not be coerced or pressured into going to work as soon as possible after they've had a child. And some mothers may have to do that financially. We want to try to make that as rare as possible, but certainly they shouldn't be coerced to do that. And they are at the moment through the tax and benefit system, because under the tax system, you're better off in terms of tax if two parents go out to work than if you are a married couple. So what we would do here, which this has also been in the tax system section of the manifesto before, we would increase the shared income tax allowance for married couples with children from 10% to 100%. So at the moment, if one parent goes out to work, they can take 10% of the other partner's tax allowance, increase their basic income tax threshold by about £1,257. It's not much, doesn't give you much money, extra money. But if we say you can transfer 100 of that, then the basic tax allowance goes up by £12,570. It doubles. So you only pay tax on, you don't have to pay tax until you earn £25,140 rather than 12,500 and so on, 13,700 and whatever, something like that, pounds. So your income tax threshold increases dramatically if you are allowed to share 100% of your tax allowance between two parents who have children. That would help married couples with children immensely. And the other thing which is new here is we would make childcare benefit payments, that's to those who receive them, who are on universal credit, that they would be paid directly to mothers rather than to childcare centres, because a mother will only get these, or the primary carer would only get childcare benefits if they go to work and then they place their children in a state subsidized, Ofsted regulated and certified childcare centre, and the payment is made directly to the childcare centre. It doesn't go to the mother. So to get that money, you have to place your children with someone else to bring up your children for 30 or 40 hours a week, all the working hours of Monday to Friday. So you are basically coerced to separate from your children from a huge amount of time when you're bringing them up when a mother should be with their children. So what we're saying is, instead of giving that money directly to childcare centers where you have no control over what they do and what they say, and you can get not all of it, but some of that money, as much as is necessary to bring up the children properly at home, that can be paid directly to the mothers so that they can be with their children for those 30 or 40 hours a week rather than being separated from their children. I think that's very, very important. And I know the argument against that is that some people would say, well, some mothers abuse that. They take the money and they just spend it on clothes and fashion and makeup and hairdos and so on. And I know that is an issue for a small minority of mothers would do that. Some people on benefits abuse their benefits. But for the majority, I think for the vast majority of mothers, they would be happy to receive those payments and then look after their children at home and stay with them themselves. And then they'd be able to home educate their children as well. And so this is all about giving mothers or primary carers choice in what they do. If you get some money and you want to pay a childcare center, you can. But if you want to bring up your child at home, you can. Or if you want to get together with neighbors and organize to bring up your children and do fun things with your neighbors and so on, then you can do that as well. We don't want the situation where everyone is coerced into putting their children in some center, and the idea of these centers is that they, as with most state education these days, is that, excuse me just a minute, sorry, just bringing myself back on the screen. The idea of course, state education these days, you leave your kids with a kindergarten or a nursery or whatever, you don't know what they're going to be taught. And the government, the powers that be, want all kids to be inculcated from the very earliest ages with LGBT, with climate alarmism, and this whole Black Lives Matter ideology, this anti-white racism, where children are brought up to believe that their own country is bad, that their own culture is bad. And there are some good people, of course, in education, but there are a hell of a lot of activists who actively want to do this to children, who actually want to inculcate these left-wing, culturally Marxist ideas and ideologies into children. And what better way of being able to do that than to separate children from 30 or 40 hours a week from their parents when they're at their youngest ages, the most impressionable ages, where they should be with their mothers, to learn the values that the mothers and parents have, and put them in a government-run, government-controlled, government-certified center where they're going to be indoctrinated with the ideologies of the powers that be. And what are the ideologies? What are the powers that be? Well, at the moment, you've got the Labour Party in government in the UK as a whole. You've also got the Labour Party in government in the Senedd in Wales. You've got the SNP and the Greens in Scotland. So all over the country, you've got hard left, far left people in positions of power. They don't want mothers and fathers to spend time with their kids at home and transmit traditional values, Christian values, nationalistic, patriotic values to their children, so they're proud of their country, so that they're brought up well-adjusted, believing in the traditional family and believing in science rather than being afraid by this climate alarmist nonsense. They want the exact opposite. So our policy here, it needs more thought in terms of exactly the level of benefit and how exactly it's going to be structured. But this is just the first stage of saying this is our intent, is to put mothers and fathers back in control of where they can put their children at the very youngest of ages, and to actually facilitate and empower them to bring up their children at home if they so wish to do that. So that's our policy on traditional family values now. So it's got all of the old stuff and it's got some new good ideas and policies in there, particularly to do with legislation and finance, and what we need to do to support traditional families. So it's up on our website already on heritageparty.org, and I'll be writing an article about it as well to share on social media later today. Anyway, so I hope you like that. And if you do, of course, we are the only party, still the only party in the UK that has a section on traditional family values and asserts that, and will continue to do so. So thanks for listening, everybody, and God bless you all.